Now, we'll talk about loops. Loops help you repeat tasks without writing the same code over and over. They're like your program's autopilot for repetitive tasks. Let's talk about for loops. The for loop is perfect when you know exactly how many times you want to repeat something. It has 3 parts: initialization, condition, and increment-decrement value. Like here, I have created a for loop. I have set initial value to 0. In condition, I have set this value to be less than 5. And finally, I have set increment to value. We can also run the loop backwards. Like here, I created another for loop. I have set initial value to 10. In condition, I have set it to be greater than 0. And finally, I used minus to decrement the value. I have another for loop which uses different values to increment or decrement. Inside this loop, I created initial value and condition same as before, but in increment section I used addition operator to increment the value by 2. Now, run this program. Basic for loop ran exactly 5 times from 0 to 4. Decrement loop ran 10 times from 10 to 0. And final loop ran 6 times because it has different increment value. Now, let's talk about Foreach loop. The Foreach loop is used to iterate over a collection such as an array, list, or any enumerable data structure without needing to explicitly use an index. The Foreach loop automatically moves through each element of the collection in order, making it simpler and cleaner to work with collections. Like here, I have created an array of integer type. Don't bother about arrays or lists, we'll learn about these in upcoming lessons. Right now, just focus on Foreach loop. Then we created Foreach loop. In condition, I created an integer type variable named number. I used integer type because we want run this loop over array of integer type. Then we used in keyword and then provided the array. In your case, it can be list or any other collection of items. Then inside the loop, I simply printed the number variable. Now, talk about functionality of this loop. The loop starts with the first element of the collection and assigns it to the number variable which we provided. Then it executes the code block. After executing the code for the current element, the loop moves to the next element and repeats the process until it has iterated through all the elements in the collection. Now run the program. Here it printed each item of the array. Now let's talk about while loops. While loops keep running as long as a condition is true. They're great when you don't know exactly how many iterations you'll need. Think of it like saying, keep doing this as long as condition is true. One thing to note here, it checks the condition first and then run the loop. Now, let's understand it using basic while loop. Here, we have integer type count variable. Next, we created a while loop, and in condition, we have set the count to be less than 5. Inside the loop, we printed the value of the variable. Then we increment the variable. It is very important to set the increment or decrement values here, because without these, loop will run infinitely till system crashes. Now run the program. While loop ran exactly 5 times till condition became false. Now let's talk about do while loops. Do while loop is almost same as while loop. There are few differences between them, but we'll learn these few moments later. First, let's see its declaration. To create do while loop, we create do block first. Inside it we place the code. Then we set the increment or decrement values. After do block, we create while block and set condition. Do while loop runs the code block first and checks the condition later. Now run the program. And do while loop also ran 5 times. Right now, you might be confused that both loops ran 5 times, then why should we not use just another while loop? So, let's talk about difference between while loop and do while loop. To see functionality of both, I have created a while loop and a do while loop. I have created an integer variable here with 0 value. In while loop, I have set the condition to be less than 0, and inside it, we increment the variable. In do while loop, I have put the same condition and increment value. Now, you can clearly see the condition is false because due to increment value is never going to less than 0. Before explaining further, run this program. And we can see here that output of do while loop is printed. You might be thinking that condition is false, then why the loop ran? The answer is, while loop checks the condition first and then run the loop, which means it runs 0 or multiple times. In our scenario, It checked the condition first, which is false, so it stopped and didn't run the loop. However, in do-while loop, it executes the code first and then checks the condition, which means it runs at least one time or multiple times. In our scenario, it executed the code and then checked the condition, which is false, so it broke the loop and came out of it. That's why it printed the output once. We use the do-while loop in scenarios where we want to run the loop at least one time. So always remember, while loop runs 0 or multiple time, and do-while loop runs at least once or multiple times. Now, let's talk about break and continue statements. Break and continue help you control the flow of your loops. Break exits the loop completely, while continue break the current iteration and moves to the next iteration. They're like an emergency exit and a skip button for your loops. Like, here I have created a for loop which runs 10 times. Inside it, I used an if statement to check if value is 5. Inside it, I used the break statement to break the loop. Next, I have created another for loop which also runs 10 times. Inside it, I used an if statement to check if the value is even. And inside it, I used the continue statement to break the current iteration and run the next one. And then, I simply printed the value. Now run the program. We can see that first loop ran 5 times from 0 to 4. But when value became 5, loop broke and didn't run any further. On the other hand, in next loop, only odd numbers are printed. That doesn't mean that loop ran fewer times. Loop ran 11 times from 0 to 10. But due to continue statement, whenever value was even, loop moved to next iteration without the running the code after continue statement. That's all for this section.